This is the seventh and final week of our summer series, The Acts of Us, making the next chapter ours. Hey, for those of you who caught the whole series, congratulations. And for those of you just joining us, we've spent the past 2 months exploring the history of the early church as told by Luke in a New Testament document we call Acts. And the goal for this entire series has been to discover the clues that show us the plan and place God has for us in His story, because the book's not finished. God's story is not over, and He intends for the next chapter to be ours. So, welcome to Journey at Home. My name is Jarrod, and today's conversation will wrap up this series, but it will also challenge you to take action in response to how Jesus asks those of us who follow Him to live life. And that's what we're trying to do here every single week. Figure out what it looks like to follow Jesus' way of living, which is always better than when we try to just do it on our own. Do all the things if you're new to this channel, like, subscribe, click the bell, but let's do a 60-second recap on what we've learned the past 2 months as we wrap up this summer series. Okay, so God's story is a story where we partner with God to be witnesses of what God is doing and has done in our lives. It's a story where we surrender to God and trust Him enough to make ourselves willing and available for whatever He wants to do in our lives. It's a story where He takes ordinary people like us and does extraordinary things in and through us together. And it's a story where we all get to make a difference that lasts beyond us. And the best part is you are invited into that story. There's a place for you in the chapter God's writing right now. If we all do our part to make this next chapter ours, we can be the kind of church that changes the world. It happened in the first century. It's happened over the century since, and there's no reason it can't happen again today. So that's part of the reason I've loved being part of this church journey over the past few years. We've never stopped trying to be the kind of people God can use to make a noticeable, impactful difference in the world. We're celebrating our 20th birthday as a church on September 7th this year. And if you've never joined us live at the Force Center in Murray, Kentucky, well, then that would be a great day to come for the first time. My wife, Sarah, and I had the privilege to help start the church 20 years ago. And we were excited and are still excited, because we love being a part of a group of Jesus followers who make it simple for people to discover what it looks like to follow Jesus. That is an open invitation to everyone. We love that we are a part of church that continues to focus on others, to make decisions through the lens of the people who don't yet call themselves church people, and to continue making our community a better place to live. One of the biggest things we've learned over the years is the only way to be that kind of church is for all of us who are part of this church to fight the never-ending gravitational pull to be focused on ourselves. And the more of us who do that, the bigger impact we have. The fewer of us who do it, the worse we are as a church. So we keep trying to make decisions week after week, month after month, year after year that focus us outward on making a difference in the lives of the people who aren't here and people we may never meet. And today, I want to wrap up the series by inviting you to partner with us to reach our full potential, what we're fully capable of, and be the kind of church God has called us to be, the kind of church that changes the world. And the inspiration for that traces all the way back to some of the churches we find in this account we call Acts. So as we close this series, I want to highlight one of those churches that inspires us. Here's the context. When Jesus left this earth, the early church movement was born in Jerusalem. But even though Jesus said His death and resurrection was for all people, and the church was for all people, they basically kept it just for the Jewish people, because it was just easier, a little more convenient. And then a season of persecution of Christians comes along, and the Jesus followers are scattered from Jerusalem all over the known world. And this is when Luke tells us that the Jewish people begin to hear rumblings that Jesus isn't just for the Jews. Here's how Luke described it. Now, those who had been scattered by the persecution that broke out when Stephen was killed traveled as far as Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch. Antioch is 300 miles away, by the way. They were spreading the word only among the Jews because they think this is only a Jewish thing, like they're just insider focused. And then he says, some of them, however, men from Cyprus and Cyrene, went to Antioch and began to speak to Greeks also, telling them the good news about the Lord Jesus. The Lord's hand was with them, and a great number of people believed and turned to the Lord. Now, these people aren't named, but there's a small group who decided to question what was assumed by everybody else. They thought, how about we tell these non-Jewish Greeks about Jesus and see what happens? And aren't you glad they did? And apparently, to the shock of almost everyone, these Greeks started following Jesus in big numbers. And God makes it clear He's accepted them, and no one can deny it. So you can imagine how quickly word starts to spread about this. Luke says, news of this reached the church in Jerusalem, and they sent Barnabas to Antioch. Now, remember Barnabas? He was in last week's story, the guy who made the first 4 offering to help other people, the guy who encouraged so many that they nicknamed him the son of encouragement, the guy who stepped in and welcomed Paul into the church when no one else would. This is the guy the church leaders at Jerusalem sent to check out what's happening at Antioch. So he travels 300 miles, and then it says this, when he arrived and saw what the grace of God had done, he was glad and encouraged. He encouraged them to remain true to the Lord with all their hearts. He was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and faith, and a great number of people were brought to the Lord. Barnabas starts helping and encouraging and making a difference with the people who are already making a difference, and the church just keeps growing. So now Barnabas is like, I need help. So he calls for his buddy Paul, also known as Saul, and Luke tells us, so for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul met with the church and taught great numbers of people. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. Now don't miss this dynamic here. What God was doing in Antioch was stunning to the Christians back in Jerusalem. It was stunning because non-Jewish people are becoming believers, which they weren't even sure could happen. And it was stunning because Antioch was a culture completely opposite of what Jews were used to. Matter of fact, these people probably had never visited one another's cities because the distance was so great and they had a lot of cultural differences. So these 2 churches in Antioch and Jerusalem knew next to nothing about one another. They had very little communication between each other. And the church in Antioch was multiracial, while the church in Jerusalem was primarily Jewish. And the church in Antioch knew the church in Jerusalem really hadn't wanted them to be a part of the club. So with all that as a backdrop, this is what happens. During this time, some prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them, named Agabus, stood up and through the Spirit predicted that a severe famine would spread over the entire Roman world. This happened during the reign of Claudius. Okay, guys, this was a big deal in those days. A famine meant certain starvation and death for entire cities and regions and sometimes generations. This would hit everyone. The implications would be catastrophic. Now, this is where it gets personal. Imagine that you were told everybody was going to struggle and food would be scarce all around the U.S. What would you do? I mean, be honest. You'd start hoarding food and preparing for the worst, wouldn't you? You'd make sure that you and yours were taken care of. But the Antioch church asked a different question. They asked, who's going to need our help and how can we help? Now, if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear how they answer it. It says, the disciples, as each one was able, like I've got this much extra and I've got this much. They just started trying to figure it out. They decided to provide help for the brothers and sisters living in Judea. That's the region that's in and around Jerusalem. So they were like, hey, our fellow Christians in and around Jerusalem are even more vulnerable than us to what's coming. They're poor. This famine will crush them and no one will help them. So we will. I'm sorry. I mean, you want to help the people you don't even know who didn't even think that God would let you in the church? Yeah. Let's all just give as we are each able and provide as much help as possible to resource our fellow Jesus followers who would be hit the hardest. And Luke tells us, this they did, sending their gifts to the elders by Barnabas and Saul. They chose to help people they didn't personally know, even though they were impacted themselves. They did it for people half a world away whom they would never meet. It would have made much more sense to look out for themselves. But in the midst of personal uncertainty, they demonstrated unprecedented generosity. Why? They did it because Jesus had paid their debt that they could not pay. They had been given forgiveness and peace with God they knew they did not deserve. Now they would do for others what God through Jesus had done for them. God so loved the world that he gave. So they would give generously and willingly in return. They were accountable to love one another like Jesus had loved them. That's what love required of them, and that's the generosity that would brand Christianity, and it would become the brand of the church. So here's my question for us as a church. Will we fight the gravitational pull to be insider focused? It takes a great deal of courage to do this because you have to intentionally disrupt your own comfort. You have to intentionally choose to inconvenience yourself for the good of people who aren't yet here, and in some cases, who may never be here. I mean, who does that? Who makes decisions that will cost them something to benefit someone they don't even know yet? I'll tell you who. Jesus-centered, others-focused, outward-facing movements of Jesus followers. They do just that. That's who the first church in Acts was. But that movement didn't stop with them. God's still looking for this kind of church to partner with as He writes the next chapter of the story that He's telling in the entire world. Will we care enough to partner and cooperate with Him? Will we be that kind of church? Will we be the kind of people who pay the price to make it simple for people in our communities to find and follow Jesus? People who aren't even here yet and that we don't even know their names yet. Will we give and serve at a level that makes it easier for them to experience God's love? Will we be the kind of people who will give so generously of our time and money that it helps people in England or Ireland or Latin America or South Africa who have never experienced Jesus' love and grace? That's what the church in Antioch did. Their generosity impacted people they'd never met in a place they'd never go. Will we have a heart for people far from God that's so big we'll do the same? That it won't matter if we get the credit from anyone who knows our name? All that matters is that they know Jesus. And if you're thinking, well, what could I possibly do to help make this a reality? I'll tell you what. You trust God and do the next right thing He asks you to do. You take the next step you've been avoiding. You make it a priority to spend time with God daily so you can see where He's at work around you and then join Him. You care about the people around you enough to show them what Jesus is doing in your life and then invite them to explore it with you. You obey God and grow in your generosity. Learn how to live with open hands. You invest your money and time into what God's doing in the world around you. You make His kingdom a bigger priority than your own little kingdom. And yes, it will cost you something, but it will cost you far more if you miss this opportunity. What if what happened in Acts is something that could happen again with us? It can, if we'll make the next chapter ours. And we don't have to have all the right answers. We can simply choose to trust God and leave the outcome in His hands. Let's be a church, a movement that's committed to doing this together. And the next chapter will be the best chapter because it'll be bigger than all of us individually.